February 18th, 2001. 4:34 p.m. Foxtone Park, Vienna, Virginia. FBI surveillance teams watch through night vision scopes as a man in a dark coat approaches a wooden footbridge. He kneels beneath it, tapes a package to the underside, then walks to the park's entrance sign. With practiced precision, he attaches a single strip of white tape to the metal post. That white tape is a signal, a message to handlers thousands of miles away in Moscow. The package is ready for pickup. 30 seconds later, a dozen FBI agents swarm from the darkness. The man's first words as handcuffs click around his wrists are remarkable. "What took you so long?" His name is Robert Hanssen. For 22 years, he's been selling America's deepest secrets to the Soviet Union and Russia. But here's what makes his story extraordinary. For 9 of those years, from 1978 to 1987, he transmitted encrypted messages from New York using a cipher system so mathematically perfect that the FBI, with all their code-breaking power, couldn't read a single word. The cipher was called a one-time pad. And today, we're going to explain exactly how Hanssen used unbreakable mathematics to become one of America's most damaging spies, and why the FBI never caught him by cracking his code. Because they didn't. They couldn't. And the way they finally identified him reveals something disturbing about the limitations of even the world's most powerful intelligence agencies. Because they didn't, they couldn't, and the way they finally identified him reveals something disturbing about the limitations of even the world's most powerful intelligence agencies.
To understand this story, we need to go back to January 1976. Robert Hanssen walks into FBI headquarters as a newly sworn special agent. 26 years old, chemistry degree from Knox College, MBA from Northwestern University. He'd wanted to work for the National Security Agency as a cryptographer, but budget cuts killed that dream. The FBI was his second choice. On the surface, Hanssen seemed like the perfect agent. Devout Catholic, married with 6 children. Technically brilliant, especially with computers, which in the 1970s made him almost unique in the Bureau. His colleagues described him as cold, socially awkward, but undeniably smart. In 1978, the FBI transferred Hanssen to New York City. His family of 5, soon to be 8, squeezed into expensive housing on a government salary that barely covered rent. Financial pressure mounted, credit card debt grew, and Hanssen made a decision that would haunt American intelligence for decades. In 1979, 3 years after joining the FBI, Hanssen walked a classified document into the offices of a company in New York City run by a Soviet military intelligence officer. The document revealed FBI surveillance operations against Soviet diplomats. This wasn't ideology. Hanssen wasn't a communist believer. He later told investigators, "I wanted to get a little money and get out of it." But that initial contact sparked a relationship that would last 22 years. But what they didn't know was that Hanssen possessed something that made him far more dangerous than a typical spy: technical expertise in cryptography and an understanding of what makes codes truly unbreakable.
Here's the challenge Hanssen faced. How do you communicate with foreign intelligence handlers when the FBI, your own employer, monitors all communications in and out of Soviet facilities? Traditional espionage used dead drops, leaving physical packages at prearranged locations. But physical meetings create risk. surveillance cameras, eyewitnesses, physical evidence. Hansen needed something better. He needed a way to transmit information electronically, by radio, but in a format that, even if intercepted, even if recorded, even if analyzed by the FBI's best cryptographers and the National Security Agency's supercomputers, would remain completely, mathematically, utterly unreadable. That's when Hansen turned to one of the most elegant concepts in cryptography, the one-time pad. Let me explain how it works, because understanding this is key to understanding why the FBI never broke Hansen's code. Imagine you want to send the message, "Drop at midnight." First, you convert each letter to a number. A equals 01, B equals 02, C equals 03, and so on. Your message becomes 04, 18, 15, 16, 01, 20, 13, 09, 04, 14, 09, 07, 08, 20. Now here's the genius part. You create a pad, a sheet of paper, filled with completely random numbers. Not pseudo-random generated by a computer algorithm, truly random, generated by physical processes like radioactive decay, atmospheric noise, or, in the Soviet system, by rooms full of typists hitting keys randomly. You add each number in your message to the corresponding number on your one-time pad. If the sum exceeds 26, you wrap around. This creates your ciphertext, an apparently meaningless string of numbers. You transmit this ciphertext by shortwave radio. The Soviet handler in Moscow has an identical copy of your one-time pad. They subtract the pad numbers from the ciphertext, and the original message appears. Then, and this is critical, you physically destroy that section of the pad, burn it, shred it, dissolve it in water. That specific key can never, ever be used again. This is why it's called a one-time pad. And here's the breakthrough realization. When used correctly, a one-time pad is mathematically unbreakable. Not really hard to break, not would take 1,000,000 years with current computers, actually, provably, theoretically impossible to break.
Why is the one-time pad unbreakable? The mathematics are surprisingly simple. When you intercept an encrypted message, code breakers look for patterns. Language has patterns. The letter E appears more frequently than Z in English. Certain letter combinations appear more often than others. These patterns are the code breaker's tools. But when you add truly random numbers to your message, you erase all patterns. Every possible decryption becomes equally probable. Let's take a simple example. You intercept the encrypted number 15. If the key number was 08, the original letter was G. If the key number was 11, the original letter was D. If the key number was 15, the original letter was Z. Without the key, you cannot determine which is correct. You have no information. 0. The uncertainty is absolute. The National Security Agency, the most powerful code-breaking organization on Earth, cannot break a one-time pad properly used. Neither can the CIA. Neither can any computer system that exists or will ever exist. Because this isn't about computing power. It's about mathematics. The security researcher Bruce Schneier once wrote, "Breaking a one-time pad is like trying to find a specific drop of water after it's been poured into the ocean." The real breakthrough came when Hansen realized he could implement this system solo, without needing constant physical meetings with Soviet handlers.
In 1979, during his first espionage cycle in New York, Hansen communicated with Soviet military intelligence, the GRU, using encoded radio transmissions and one-time pads he created himself. He would wait until late at night, tune his shortwave radio to a prearranged frequency, and transmit bursts of encrypted numbers. Soviet intelligence officers in New York or Moscow, using their matching one-time pads, would decode his messages within minutes. The FBI's counterintelligence division monitored Soviet communications constantly. They recorded Hansen's transmissions. They analyzed them. They threw their best cryptographic minds at the problem. They got nowhere. One-time pad encryption, when implemented correctly, produces ciphertext that looks like pure random noise. There's no mathematical technique, no frequency analysis, no known plain text attack, no computational brute force that can distinguish it from actual random data or decrypt it without the key. However, the biggest challenge was still ahead, because while the one-time pad is theoretically perfect, human implementation is never perfect, and that's where most spies make fatal mistakes.
For 9 years, from 1978 to 1987, Hansen operated in New York and Washington using one-time pads and radio transmissions to send Moscow some of America's most valuable secrets. What did he transmit? Documents that should never have left FBI headquarters. He identified 3 Soviet intelligence officers who were secretly working for the United States: Boris Yuzhin, Valery Martinov, and Sergei Motorin. All 3 were betrayed. 2 were executed by firing squad. 1 spent 15 years in Soviet labor camps. He revealed the existence of a multi-million-dollar tunnel the FBI had constructed under the Soviet embassy in Washington for eavesdropping. He disclosed comprehensive lists of FBI double agent operations, Americans pretending to work for the Soviets while actually feeding them disinformation. He provided details of American satellite surveillance capabilities, nuclear war strategies, and counterintelligence techniques. The documents went into dead drops, but coordination messages, setting times, locations, confirming receipt, went through one-time pad encrypted radio transmissions that the FBI could record but never read. In 1981, Hansen stopped spying. Financial pressure had eased. His wife discovered cash he couldn't explain and demanded answers. He confessed to her, to his priest, to his attorney. They convinced him to stop. But in 1985, Hansen returned to espionage. By then, the FBI had transferred him back to FBI headquarters in Washington. His access to secrets had grown exponentially. This second period lasted until 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed. Hansen went dark again, worried that the chaos in Moscow might expose him. In 1992, Hansen restarted communications with Russian intelligence. In 1993, he attempted a risky face-to-face meeting with a GRU officer in a parking garage, identifying himself by his old code name, Ramon Garcia. The Russian officer didn't recognize the name and rebuffed him. The Russian government filed a protest with the U.S. State Department about an FBI agent approaching their intelligence officer. The FBI opened an investigation into the parking garage incident, but incredibly, they never connected it to Hansen. He was questioned and cleared. From 1999 to 2001, Hansen's third and final espionage period unfolded. Now he communicated primarily through computer disks left at dead drops,
though he still occasionally used encrypted communications. The FBI knew something was wrong. Too many operations were compromised. Too many agents were being arrested. After catching CIA officer Aldrich Ames in 1994, investigators realized a second mole must exist. They codenamed the unknown spy Gray Suit. But they couldn't find him. The encrypted communications offered no clues. The one-time pad messages, even when recorded and stored, revealed nothing.
Here's the disturbing truth. The FBI never broke Hansen's code. They never cracked the one-time pad. They never decrypted a single radio transmission. All that sophisticated signals intelligence, all those code-breaking resources, useless against mathematical perfection. So how did they catch him? Money. $7 million to be precise. In 2000, the FBI paid a disaffected KGB officer named Alexander Sherbakov $7 million for a file on B, an anonymous mole inside U.S. intelligence. The file didn't contain Hansen's name, but it included an audio tape from 1986 of B speaking with his KGB handler. FBI analyst Bob King listened to the tape. The voice used a specific quote from General George S. Patton's famous speech to the Third Army about the purple-pissing Japanese. King remembered only one FBI agent regularly used that bizarre quote, Robert Hansen. They matched fingerprints from trash bags in the KGB file to Hansen. They matched voice analysis. They promoted him to a desk job at FBI headquarters where he could be watched constantly. And on February 18, 2001, they caught him red-handed making a dead drop at Foxstone Park. The Webster Commission, established to investigate FBI security after Hansen's arrest, concluded that his espionage represented possibly the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. The damage assessment revealed he'd compromised over 6,000 pages of classified documents and 26 computer diskettes. He'd betrayed dozens of intelligence operations. He'd caused the deaths of at least 2 agents and probably more. And for 22 years, his encrypting communications remained unreadable. Even today, those recordings sit in FBI archives, still encrypted, still unbreakable. The mathematical perfection of the one-time pad endures. Hansen pleaded guilty to 15 counts of espionage in July 2001. He received 15 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. He was imprisoned at ADX Florence, the federal supermax prison in Colorado, in solitary confinement for 23 hours per day. On June 5, 2023, Hansen was found dead in his cell. He was 79 years old. Cause of death? Colon cancer. The one-time pad remains the only provably unbreakable encryption system in existence. Modern intelligence agencies still use it for the most sensitive communications, though implementation has evolved. Instead of paper pads, they use quantum random number generators and specially secure digital devices. The mathematics haven't changed. The absolute security hasn't changed. But Hansen's case reveals a fundamental truth about security. The strongest encryption in the world cannot protect against human betrayal. The FBI caught Hansen not through technical sophistication, but through old-fashioned human intelligence, buying information from a source inside the enemy's organization. Today, as we worry about quantum computers potentially breaking current encryption standards like RSA and AES, it's worth remembering the one-time pad will remain secure. Quantum computers cannot solve mathematically impossible problems, but quantum computers also can't solve the human problem, the problem of trusted insiders, the problem of greed, ideology, ego, or desperation that turns protectors into betrayers. Hansen's encrypted messages were perfect. His operational security was not. He used FBI computers to check if he was under investigation. He hacked colleagues' systems. He visited old offices where he no longer worked.
He talked about classified matters at lunches. He became increasingly reckless. The lesson isn't about codes, it's about culture. The Webster Commission found that the FBI had pervasive inattention to security. Background checks were inadequate. Financial disclosure requirements were inconsistent. No one noticed when Hansen made unexplained large purchases. No one questioned his unusual computer access patterns. No one tracked his after-hours presence in offices where he didn't work. Security wasn't seen as a core function, it was seen as an impediment to operational efficiency. That's changed since 2001, but the fundamental tension remains. How do you create a culture of security without creating a culture of paranoia? How do you share information effectively while controlling access rigorously? These aren't problems technology can solve. They're problems humans must solve. If you found this story fascinating, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. We dive deep into the technical problem-solving and engineering brilliance, and sometimes the technical failures that shape military history. Next time, we're examining the engineering genius behind the Enigma machine and the brilliant mathematical techniques Alan Turing used to crack it. It's a completely different story from Hansen's, because unlike the one-time pad, Enigma was breakable. The question was whether British codebreakers could solve the problem fast enough to change the course of World War II. Thanks for watching, and remember, the strongest lock in the world is useless if someone inside has the key.